Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
My guest today is a transformational teacher, worldwide speaker, author of 2 national best-selling books, and a visionary whose mission it is to awaken and inspire people across the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. He's been interviewed by the likes of Larry King, Tom Bilyeu on the Impact Theory podcast, and Inc. magazine calls him the mindfulness guru that billionaires go to for advice. Now, if you immediately find yourself captivated by him, you're not alone. He's a gifted speaker, and in fact, he spoke in front of an audience of 3,000 people at age 8. And by the time he was 18, he'd already spoken in front of over 100,000 people in live audiences in 300 different venues. His most recent book, The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go, is a practical guide to unlocking your life's greatest power and routinely experiencing miracles in your everyday life. The book features captivating and insightful stories of exceptional people who've embodied the practice of surrender, such as Nelson Mandela, Viktor Frankl, Lady Gaga, Bruce Lee, Laird Hamilton, Tyler Perry, and David Chappelle, just to name a few. So if you've ever found yourself tired of fighting with life, exhausted from the grind, unfulfilled despite all your achievements, then I suspect you're going to learn a lot from the wisdom of today's guest, who might just tell us some stories about how the train stations in India can provide a doctorate level education in surrender, why showing up at the airport without a ticket can lead to the adventure of a lifetime, and why marrying someone who you've never seen before, whose language you don't even speak, might just produce a miracle. Please welcome to the Great Man Within podcast, Kute Blackson.
Wow, thanks for having me. That's probably one of the most interesting, captivating, well thought out intros on a podcast I've ever received. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I have a lot of respect for the research I've done on you and the work that you've produced. And so I wanted to make sure you felt honored and stepped into this space. I can imagine some of our guests are wondering, what does it mean by marrying someone you've never even seen before, whose language you don't even speak, producing a miracle?
Yeah, well, that's my parents, right? In a nutshell, I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. I live in the US now, so a citizen of the world. But in terms of how my parents met, because that's kind of the foundation of my incarnation into this lifetime, at least. And I think the story is steeped in surrender. So I'll share it as a maybe way to kick off the interview for those that most of the folks may not know. My father was born in a very, 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 very poor part of Ghana, on a concrete floor in the middle of nowhere, to an amazing, amazing woman, my grandmother. And so when my father was about 8 years old, he would have these visions of a Japanese guru, a Japanese spiritual teacher. Imagine in the 1940s, right? No internet, no communication. There's no way to have access to any information. So he starts having these visions. This Japanese guru, imagine the Japanese version of Yogananda, starts to teach my father about the nature of the universe, life, who we are, the nature of the cosmos. And so my father gets these downloads from this teacher. And when my father's 15, he has a conversion to God, to spirituality, gives his life to God, becomes a Christian, and he starts healing people at the age of 15. We're talking, I grew up seeing, as a kid, my first memories, blind people seeing, deaf people hearing. My first memories as a young boy was literally seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face, and stands up. And my father. And so I grew up around miracles. And for me, it wasn't a wow. It wasn't anything unusual. I didn't think anything abnormal of it. I just thought it was normal. I thought this was everybody's reality. It just felt like this is life, And I think that's also the beauty, because it wasn't a big deal. My father would look at a person in a wheelchair and say, stand up. Why are you in this wheelchair? You're not sick. Stand up. Boom. And they would stand up. My father would look at a person with crutches. They hadn't walked in 10 years. And he would look at them and say, why do you have crutches? Put his hands on them. Throw the crutches away. Well, I haven't walked in 5 years, 10 years. Do you believe? Yes or no? Well, you either believe or don't. Do you believe? As soon as they kind of met him in that moment, they would start running around the room. And so he was considered a miracle man of Africa. built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, a huge church in London, 4,000 people every Sunday. And so when he was a kid, he just started performing these miracles like a gift. He just said, he read the Bible as a kid and he said, well, Jesus said, the things I do, you can do these things and more. So he believed it. That was what was crazy. He just believed. And so he started putting his hands on people. People got healed. The word spread. Thousands of people came. He built churches. His operation exploded. When he was 37 years old, in the 70s, he got married, had 3 children. His first wife died. He's in a store in Ghana, West Africa. A book kind of falls off the shelf. He looks at the back of the book. He's looking at the back of the book. He sees the face of this Japanese guru. He is completely shocked because he doesn't know that this Japanese guru is even real, doesn't even know he even exists other than in his imagination. So he writes to this man, gets the address, writes to this man. He says, you're my spiritual father. You've been teaching me since I was a kid. This is a miracle. I want to meet you. So the man sends his son-in-law, basically his son, sends his son-in-law to meet my father in Ghana. The son-in-law is so impressed, he invites my father to go back to Japan on a lecture tour, to meet the guru, to travel with the guru, to give a lecture. My father's honored. They decide on dates. My father said, look, my first wife has died. I'm looking for a wife. I'm 37, 38 years old. Can you pray for me? That was it. Nothing else. The son-in-law goes back to Japan, gives a lecture. In his lecture, he announces the tour dates. My father is coming to go on a tour with the guru. Now, my mother, she is about 28, 29 at the time. She grew up in the spiritual organization of the teacher and the guru. This is her spiritual teacher. This is her family and her parents' spiritual teacher. So she grew up meditating. And she's 28 at the time. In Japan, if you're not married by 23, 24, you have kids by 26, you're old. So her life is basically finished. And her prayer is, she basically gave up on love and she gave up on relationship. And she basically said, God, I will marry anyone you tell me to marry. It doesn't matter what he's like, where he's from, rich, poor, short. Sometimes we have all of these ideas in terms of what we think our life should be and who we think we should be with that we don't realize with our goal setting, intention setting, that we're kind of limiting the universe in some way. We're so attached to our projected idea of what we think something should be that we're not truly open. And so my mother says, I will marry anyone you tell me to marry. I just want to know undeniably in my soul, in my being, that this is my partner. Just give me that clarity. So she's in the audience. She hears about my father, an African man. My mother can't speak English. My father can't speak Japanese. She hadn't even seen a picture of him. I mean, who knows? She feels this knowing, this is my husband. Undeniable knowing, this is my husband. So she can't speak English. Her sister translates. She writes a letter to my father. She gets the address. My father's meditating. He's in London on his way to Japan. He's, I think, staying in London for a couple of months. In his meditation, he feels the sense like your wife is going to come to you very soon. He goes to the mailbox the next day. There's an envelope from Japan. Before he opens it, he feels, this is my wife. He opens it. It's a letter from my mother. Nothing romantic, nothing flirtatious, nothing other than look forward to seeing you speak on these dates. This is who I am. End of story. No picture, nothing. He says, this is my wife. He writes to her, speaks no Japanese, gets translated. And he says in his letter, would you be open to moving to Ghana? She writes back and says, if it's God's will. He writes back and says, yes, it's God's will. Marry me. And so they agree to get married, sight unseen. I mean, crazy, but just following the deep knowing, the profound energy, frequency, knowing of their souls and allowing that to move them. It wasn't based on looks. It wasn't based on status. It wasn't based on physicality. It was based on the soul knowing and surrendering to that deepest impulse that was in alignment for them. So my father goes to Japan, meets my mother for the first time. They can't speak. They give him 45, it's old school. They give him 45 minutes in a park by themselves with chaperones. And they kind of like point to each other, agreeing to get married. They feel it. They say yes to that. They surrender to that. So 6 weeks later, they have a wedding plan. My father goes on a lecture tour throughout Japan. He's not being paid for it. My father doesn't have money by Japanese standards. You know, Japan is much more expensive. He comes from a fourth world country in the 70s, you know, and you can't marry a Japanese as a foreigner and as a black person, you know, an African guy, you know, who doesn't have very much to show for himself. You can't marry a Japanese woman and not throw a wedding and a ceremony and honor the parents. So my father doesn't have the money by Japanese standards. And so he's meditating. Once again, he hears just, hey, just trust. He goes on this lecture tour. 6 weeks later, he goes to his mailbox, opens the mailbox. There is an envelope with $7,000 in USD in cash. No name, no nothing, no trace. All it says is, this is for your wedding.
My gosh. And that's in the 70s,
And that's in the
$7,000.
70s.
Yeah.
It was enough to at least buy a kimono and get some food and throw a wedding. And so they got married, and he never knew who it was until like a decade later. And so I think that is an amazing, for me, the story of how my parents met. Whenever I think about it, gives me a lot of inspiration in terms of what it is to boldly follow your soul, boldly surrender. I'm glad they did, because if they didn't, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. That is such a compelling and incredible story. And to me, it's interesting. My interpretation of that is it takes such incredible courage to do that. But I imagine if we were to speak to your father, and I know your mother has passed on, that for them, it probably just felt like the easiest thing in the world to do.
Yeah.
One of the things that you start the book, The Magic of Surrender, with, which I thought was so beautiful, is a tribute to your mother and her passing. And would you speak a little bit, actually, can you tell part of the story of when she was diagnosed with cancer and her incredible grace with how she experienced and accepted? I mean, it's basically the
inspiration for the book.
Yeah,
honestly.
exactly.
Exactly. It's like, this was not Magic of Surrender is not the book I thought I was going to write. I had all of these other ideas of the book I thought I was going to write, the book I thought I should write, the book I thought would sell, the book I thought my clients would want, the book I thought had sexy titles, And one day I was looking at this whiteboard of all these titles of books I was trying to make happen. None of them resonated. And the only word that really resonated was surrender. And that's when I knew that this was the book that was seeking to happen. And that's when I thought back to my mother, and I realized the seeds for this book were planted in that experience that you just referenced. And so in 2016, I'm on a high. I'm traveling the world. I'm doing events. I'm promoting my first book. I mean, I was on Fox. I was on Larry King. I mean, I was on all this media, and I was so excited promoting my book, You Are the One. And, life has a way of knowing how to humble you in the highest moments. And that's why I always say, hey, don't get attached to the high and don't get attached to the low, because they all come and they all go. They all pass. They're all transitory. And I think the real freedom is to not get attached to any of them, but just to learn as you're going through them and enjoy the process. And so here I am on this high, and I get this phone call from my father. And him and I, we weren't so close at the time. There was love there, but we weren't like best buddies. And so for him to call me was a little strange. So I get a phone call. And it says, your mother has been diagnosed with cancer. You need to call her. I can't even speak, And so I called my mother, and she was the person that raised me. She was the one that was my best friend growing up. I mean, it was me and her. She was my everything. And so I called my mother, and I said, is it true? And in her typical fashion, she downplays it. I realized, shit, this is real. And so I packed my bags. I start flying back and forth from Los Angeles to London, LA, where I live, to London, every month, basically. I mean, it's brutal. 12 hours, for a week at a time to just take care of her during her chemo. I had every intention to fix her, to heal her, alternative therapies. And I tried everything. In the first month-ish, I realized that nothing I do is really going to work. I realized she was going to pass. I wasn't totally at peace with it, but when you look at the situation and you see what's about to happen, I could feel it. It was kind of obvious to me. And so I went through a process of surrendering. I went through a process of beginning to, shall we say, let go. I don't say give up, but it was letting go of future hope. And it was the letting go of that future hope that she might live that really freed me. And what started out as the worst year of my life turned out to be the best year, because in that letting go, it freed me up to be fully present with her. Because then every moment I realized could actually be the last moment. There may not be another year, another moment, another healing, another situation. And so every time we'd have a cup of tea, I thought this could be the last time. Every time I'd see her eat, this could be the last moment. And every moment became so freaking precious, sacred. And I would sit with her in chemo sessions. We would just sit and just talk about nothing and everything. And for me, the regret was, why the hell did I wait till she was dying to have this moment. We think we have another moment. We think we have tomorrow. We think, and we make all these plans, and there were all of these things I wanted to do with her that I planned to do with her, but I just didn't have time because I was running around saving the world, so to speak. And so it really hit me. And I got to be with her, spend such an incredible, just quality time, just being with her. It was transformational. 6 months into the process, the doctor said, there's nothing else we can do. She was going to have surgery. And the doctor said, there's nothing else we can do. So start getting your affairs in order. Basically, you're going to die in a nice way, is what they say. And I knew it was coming, but, when they say it in that moment, it just, certain reality hits you. And I remember feeling really emotional. And there was a tear rolling down my face. We went to the parking lot. In the car, I looked my mother in the eyes and asked her 2 questions. The first question was, are you afraid? It's natural. You're facing your mortality. Like, you're going to die. This is it. And she looked, this little Japanese woman looks me in the eyes, and without batting an eyelid, she says, no, I'm not afraid, because I know I'm not this body, that this body is a temporary vehicle for my soul. And my soul, what I am, is beyond birth and beyond death, that I'm not going to die. I'll be with you, guiding you from the other side. And I just felt such a profound, transmission of faith and knowing from her. And I realized, shit, my mother is like an enlightened being, and I didn't know it, and to me, she was just my mother. And then I asked my mother, is there anything I can do for you? I wanted to be a good son. What do you need? Where can I take you? What can I buy you? And she looks at me, and this is where I really got the depth of her surrender. I said, what can I do? And she said, there's nothing I need. There's nothing I want. She said, all I want for my life is what God wants for my life. There's nothing else I want. Complete peace. No acting, just like matter of fact. I knew she meant it. And I realized in that moment, this entire year, she was at peace. She was a very emotional being, but she didn't cry. She wasn't angry. She didn't feel like a victim. She was really at peace. I saw that she wasn't attached to living, and she wasn't attached to dying. She was just open to whatever her soul's journey was, whatever her highest soul's journey was, and whatever life had in store for her. And that was the foundation of her freedom. I mean, she was free this entire time. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She was just being and enjoying life. And I realized, wow, she was really surrendered, truly, profoundly surrendered. And I think that was her secret. When I started reflecting too, after this process, and I was thinking about the book, I also reflected on, the great ones, whether it was Jesus or Buddha or Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Mandela or Bob Marley or Bruce Lee or Muhammad Ali. At some point, all of the great ones, what made them great is that they surrendered themselves. And in that surrender of themselves to their deeper mission, their deeper calling, to their souls, to their deeper truth, they were able to transcend the limits of their own ego's limitation, the limits of their own human capacity, and they tapped into another dimension of their own potential, another dimension of their own power. They tapped into that sort of infinite potential, like true infinite potential of life. And I think that's when life was able to manifest through them, in a sense. And so I just want to, shall we say, stir for people, encourage people, challenge people, reframe for people this whole idea of surrender that I saw with my mother so powerfully. I saw with my father so powerfully, because they both live surrender in a certain sense. And in our culture, I think we see surrender as something weak, as negative, as giving up, as waving the white flag, as passive, as doing nothing, as you're going to be a doormat. You're not going to manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. You're going to get less than. But I want people to get excited about surrender and see it differently. Like, what if you didn't get less? What if in true surrendering, true letting go, truly allowing, truly releasing, you didn't get less, but you got more than you could imagine and project with your ego's capacity to create life? What if you got more beyond your imagination, beyond your wildest dreams? What if you got more and not less? And I think that's the invitation of surrender. we have this idea that to surrender means you're going to be homeless. To surrender means you go to live in the Himalayas and have a robe and a baking bowl and sell everything and shave your head. It's like, I want to say, no, that doesn't mean what surrender is. And so it's letting go of control, or shall we say the illusion of control. It's letting go of that illusion. I think we think we're in control, but I think control is the master addiction. And if we've seen anything the last couple of years, maybe we're not as in control as we thought we were. And so it's this letting go of this illusion that we are in control of everything in our lives. It is a letting go, a relaxing of trying to manipulate and push and force life to fit into our limited idea based on our ego, how we think it should be. It's a letting go of the idea of who we think we should be and how we think our life should be, and just truly being open and available to allowing life to reveal itself, allowing this deep intelligence that is life to show us, to reveal itself, to allow ourselves to be led. And I think when we truly are open and available and curious, it doesn't mean you don't take action. It doesn't mean you aren't in life. It doesn't mean you sit around. It means you feel your deepest truth. You feel your deepest calling. You feel that deepest impulse that is seeking to express through you. And then you align with that and you take action in alignment with that. You give 100% without the attachment. And so I really believe that surrender is the most powerful thing that we can do to manifest in alignment with the universe, in alignment with our truth. Look at Mandela, like Mandela's life. For those that think surrender might be weak, look at Mandela wasn't weak. Mandela lived a life that he could not have even planned. You can't sit there and strategize Mandela kind of life. It's, I'm going to spend 26 years in prison. Then I'm going to come out. And should he have not spent 26 years in prison? What if he didn't? But maybe that's what his soul needed to develop the mental, the emotional, the forgiveness, the empathy, the vision, the soul force to be able to then come out and move humanity even long after he's dead. And so surrender to me is the password for freedom. And most of us, we all want magic. Magic is that which is beyond our imagination, beyond our capacity to. We all want magic. Who doesn't want something magical? But very few of us want to surrender. And I think there is no true magic without surrender. And so that's the invitation.
That's beautiful. And, even before we get to magic, I think there's people who are just like, you know what? I'd love magic, but how about if life just stops sucking as much as it does, right? And this is why I think it's a great story, a great segue to your story about the train stations in India, right? Because I know so many of us, surrender is an incredible tool for when you're fighting life and life is not showing up the way you want it to, whether it's the weather that's outside or the traffic and someone cuts you off. Your spouse isn't behaving the way you want them to. The kid is unruly, and we can get angry and fight it. And when everything is going perfect, when all the constellation lines up for that bright shining moment, we can thread the eye of the needle and everything feels fine for a moment. And then one of those variables change and we're back to fighting with the world again. And so I think your story about the train station in India is such a great one because it's something that could happen any day of the week. Maybe not quite to the extreme as it does in India, but on the scale, it can happen in everyday life. Tell the story and what you learned from that 9-hour train delay in India.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I don't want to give everything away, but in a nutshell, like cliffhanger, right? I was in this train station in India and I like to be on time. And if you know anything about Indian train stations, it is the worst nightmare for a control freak. India is the worst nightmare for punctuality, for control, basically anyone who kind of lives in the West, and somehow India finds those places inside of you that are holding on, that aren't surrendered, and just goes for them. It just goes for it. And in a nutshell, here I am in an Indian train station and I'm waiting. My mother's Japanese. We arrived an hour, 50 minutes, half an hour before the train time. And the train didn't arrive. And to be honest, I forget how long it was, but I must have waited 8 hours, 9. I mean, it was so long, but I'm waiting at this train station, pissed off, frustrated, upset, looking at the clock, mad at the world, mad at everyone in the train station. And here I'm in this train station in India, seeing everyone on the platform kind of just chill. Everybody is just relaxed. I'm seeing a guy there, reading, I'm seeing a person over there meditating, doing yoga. I'm seeing a family literally sleeping on the floor. I'm seeing another family, they're making like a little potluck, eating food together. And I'm the one that's pissed off, frustrated. Like every second is seeming like a day. And let's just say I wasn't suffering. And I think as human beings, so many of us, we suffer in so many ways. And I think if you're in a moment of suffering, if you really check yourself, there is always somewhere in the back of your mind this belief that is going on. The experience that I'm having is not the experience I should be having. The experience I'm having is not the experience I should be. I don't care what it is. There's some version of that is going on in a form of resistance. And that resistance is part of what creates suffering. So just take a look. What am I resisting? What am I holding on to? And so, people talk about, there's this idea too that surrender is hard, it's difficult, it's tough. And we tell ourselves the story. But I also want to just open up the possibility that let's just open to that surrender is natural. I think you mentioned it too. Surrender is natural. Surrender, like what if we were to open it? Surrender is easy. It's the nature of things. It's just that through life and through childhood and through pain and hurt and traumas and everything we went through, we've just gotten conditioned in a certain way to hold on. We've just got so conditioned, like for those listening on audio, I'm making a fist right now, and with my fist, I'm holding a pen, and I'm holding so tightly to this pen. And we just got so conditioned to hold on to a certain way of being, a certain way of controlling, a certain way of, living life, a certain way of being ourselves, that this holding on posture and pattern of ourselves, starts feeling normal. And this starts feeling more normal. But the truth is, letting go is the easiest thing. It's just our conditioning. And so, as children, when we're born, we're surrendered. We're lying there, we pee our pants, we pee in the face of our parents, we poop, we burp, we fart, we roll around, we wake up, we sleep, then we get a bit older, we're not so conditioned yet, we haven't been taught what's good and right and wrong, we'll stand there naked, we're not thinking, am I fat, and do I have to hide, what do people think? We will sing at the top of our lungs, we haven't been told what's good, what's bad, we are in the free-flowing nature of our essence. We are free-flowing. We are in that flow as children. We're following our flow. We're following our curiosity. We're not judging this is good and that's bad and that person's good. We're just in the free-flowing openness of surrender. We are living surrender in a very innocent and pure, unconditioned way. We're in touch with our essence. And so what happens? I think it's important that we just have a bit of an understanding too, to think about ourselves in terms of what happens, because then we can start seeing what starts creating some of the often unconscious layers of resistance inside of us that move us out of the flow. So here we are, these free beings, bright, alive, whole, perfect, and complete. Then we incarnate, we meet our parents. They're just doing the best that they can do based on their life and their upbringing and their childhood and their unconscious traumas and ancestral karma, so to speak. And so we're born into a preset, shall we say, pattern of dysfunction. Maybe dad wasn't present, dad's an alcoholic, mom's an alcoholic, mental illness, abuse, physical, mental, emotional, sexual, neglect. Maybe they were great. Maybe there was divorce. Maybe there was abandonment. Maybe our parents were just good people, but they just weren't in touch with their emotions, so they didn't know how to meet our emotional needs. And so there was a level of pain. And the first thing that starts happening for us as children is we start learning all sorts of, shall we say, strategies and defense mechanisms to shut down, disconnect, and not feel the pain of what's going on around us. We start erecting all sorts of walls and contorting ourselves into a certain way to not feel the pain that dad is crazy, or dad is hitting mom, or dad is hitting my brother, or they're fighting all the time and we're so sensitive. So we start shutting down, disconnecting, not feel, and those sort of unfelt, unprocessed emotions start building up, layers and layers and layers and layers and layers. And then we kind of develop a defense mechanism into a certain way of being as a way to not feel that pain. And unconsciously, we make up this sort of strategy of like, I'm going to go through life. Now I found a way to not feel that pain, but now I've disconnected from a part of myself, control. I've shut down I've learned to control a part of myself so I don't feel the pain. And now we go through life in a certain position, in a certain shape, with this intention of never feeling that pain again. So now we go through life in an unconscious pattern of being in resistance. And we don't even know, because we think that way of resisting emotion, pain, the free flowing energy of feeling, we think that is normal. We think that is who we are. And then we also learn a way of being in the world unconsciously to, well, who do I need to be in order to get love and validation and approval? For me, as a young boy, I thought I needed to be the perfect kid, the spiritual one, the responsible one, the preacher's kid, be appropriate all the time. So we all start developing all sorts of roles and masks and personas in order to get love, validation, and approval. So here we are controlling, avoiding pain. Here we are controlling to get love and betraying parts of ourselves, shutting down parts of ourselves. And that becomes a certain shape that we become. And we become the go free to surrender, free to be truly open, because to truly be open requires letting go, which can be scary because the fear is, oh shit, if I let go, if I surrender, it might not be safe. And I might get hurt again, like I was hurt when I was 5, like I was hurt when I was 8. And so sometimes I think it's also important in the process of surrender to be gentle with ourselves, to also have the compassion for the way in which we resist, to have compassion for our resistance, to have compassion for those defense mechanisms, because they meant well. And I think if we can just start by having awareness of what are my defense mechanisms, because most of us, when not conscious, we think, no, this is just who I am. And so I think it's important that we start questioning ourselves to realize, well, is who I am who I really am, or is it simply who I've been conditioned to be? And I've been conditioned to be that way to avoid pain and get love. And then I can start also having some compassion. So we don't have to force ourselves into surrender. We don't have to beat ourselves up or judge ourselves. I should be surrendering now. We can maybe start having the compassion for those parts of ourselves that are resisting, because the resistance can show us where the fear is. The resistance can show us where that pain, the resistance can show us where we can actually move into a deeper letting go. And I think when we can meet our resistance with mercy and grace and compassion and tenderness and loving, then those parts of ourselves that were created with good intention can begin to also breathe and relax and slowly, just gently start letting go. And I think that's important. So yeah, here I am at the train station, just resisting everything, because that's how I learned to live life. That's how we learn to live life. And the train station and India, honestly, just beat me into submission because I began realizing there's so much stuff that I can't control. I would control how people perceive me, and do you like me, and what do you think of me, and does my dad like me? And it was just exhausting. And in India, because everything is happening every moment, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. While I was in India, I was constantly looking around because there's so much poverty. I don't know if you've been to India, but there's so much poverty, and there's dirt, and there's poverty. And then you see homeless people, and then you see children begging, and then you see a child on the floor by themselves in the trash. And then you see, every moment you see something that you can't imagine is going to top that, and it tops it. And then what it triggers for you, at least for me and for most people, it triggers this feeling of, it shouldn't be that way. Life shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be that way. But the thing is, it is. It is. And so it starts showing you, India is like this, it's life too, but India is kind of a heightened, shall we say, simulation that shows you your points of resistance. And whenever you have this shouldn't be that way, shouldn't be that way, shouldn't be that, shouldn't be the way, suffering. One thing that really helped me, this might take the conversation a bit deeper if you want, but I'll do my best. But I think it's one thing that really helped me, because I was in such resistance in India at the train station, at everything. Everything shouldn't be that way. But I realized through months of being in India and through spending time with spiritual teachers in India and having my heart cracked open over and over again and being in so much suffering over and over again, was I realized that there was an expectation that I had that this world should be some kind of perfect utopia. And there was a part of me that was looking for, shall we say, a perfection in this world. A perfection in this three-dimensional world, a perfection in my personality. If I do enough therapy, if I heal myself enough, if I do enough breath work, Reiki, rebirthing, then I'm going to be perfect. If I can be perfect, then I can make this world perfect. I can change the world and make it perfect. And I realized this world will never be perfect. This was a moment of profound freedom when I understood the nature of this dimension. We live in a world of duality. We live in a world of interdependent polaric opposites. That is the nature of life. It's physics. It's physics, plus, minus, good, bad, up, down, black, white, male, female, tall, short, rich, poor. It's physics. It's the Tao. Interdependent polaric opposites, the nature of life is the dance of life. It's the Tao. And I think when we realize that, at least for me, it began to free me up from projecting into this dimension. Maybe, another dimension in the heavens that we come from, wherever that is, perfect utopia. But this dimension, I realized this 3D physical dimension that is impermanent is not meant to be perfect. And that's what makes it perfect. Because as souls, and that acceptance, for me, really freed me up. It freed me up to stop resisting the train station and stop resisting everything like, this shouldn't be that way, shouldn't be that way, shouldn't be that way, but it is. And when I got out of that resistance to accept the nature of this dimension, the level of freedom opened up to accept what it was. Then I could go into the world and share my gift to maybe bring more brightness. Then I could go into the world and share my gift and maybe bring more love and more joy, but not from a place of resistance, not from a place of suffering, not from a place of anger, but from a place of gratitude, appreciation, a place of more neutrality versus againstness.
This conversation about resistance is so important, at least from my own personal experience, is the understanding that, and you hinted at this, is it can become a gradual process of proficiency around resistance, just like learning to play the piano or a new golf swing. And just a personal story that I'm navigating right now is, for the last 6 months, I've been dealing with an undiagnosed illness that has kind of taken away my energy. I'm down to 40% of my capacity. And when it first started happening, I've had to stop working out for the last 2.5 months. I'm a very active person. And exactly like you said, Kute, when it first started happening, I shouldn't be sick. This shouldn't be how it's happening. I'm eating healthy. I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. I've got business to tend to. At the time I was running a global push-up challenge to raise money for charity. I had to drop out of the challenge. It's not supposed to be this way. I'm embarrassed, right? And then I take a week off to recover. I'm not getting better. I should be getting better. And, for the first month, I was fighting it. I was resisting. I was angry. Every morning I woke up and I didn't have the energy. My mind would spiral into a million different directions to try and figure out, what was wrong. And all that did was just create the suffering that you talk about. And that suffering is optional. What's been interesting is I haven't improved at all physically. Physically, like I'm actually, if you're looking at my metrics and my biology, I'm at the worst state I've ever been.
Wow.
Emotionally and spiritually, I've never been stronger.
That's beautiful.
Because the transition to when I wake up in the morning and I have no energy and I don't even want to get out of bed, it's like, okay, this is how it is right now.
Yeah.
And you said something on Tom Bilyeu's podcast. I think it was kind of the clip they even put at the very beginning of the episode. It's, these things that we look at in life that we think are our enemies. We think that they're the injustices that we've been suffering, the indignities. These are all preparations for our soul, right? To get stronger, to then be ready for and you said this with Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 26 years. And I think you read one of his quotes in the book about 1,000 different indignities. It was like all of that pressure that created the anger and the intelligence that when it was time to come out, he was ready to lead a revolution. So to be able to look at that as it's happening and to recognize I'm getting stronger in some regard has been the thing that's allowed me to keep going with a smile on my face.
First, I want to acknowledge you because it's easy to read about it. It's easy to watch a video about it. But when you're going through it and it affects your physicality and you're going through it, that's when the shit is real. It's not theory anymore. And so the fact that you're able to tease out the gifts and the lesson, I really acknowledge you, really acknowledge you for that. And I think what helps us is also when we go through those challenging moments is to understand that we are a soul first and foremost. And when we understand the purpose of life, again, we're going a little spiritual here, but I think it can also shift our relationship with the experiences that we go through. If we understand that we are first and foremost a soul, and we are a soul having a human experience, and we're a soul that we incarnate into this human experience in order to learn, in order to grow, in order to evolve, in order to learn lessons. And ultimately, life is a school for our soul's evolution. And if we're a soul and that we're here to learn, if we really understand and we start looking at life from a soul level, it can shift your relationship to surrender it. Because there's certain events that happen that sometimes are freaking unfair, that sometimes don't make sense, that sometimes can be really challenging and hurtful and painful. How the hell do you surrender to that? I'm not saying necessarily or an abusive situation, or I'm not saying surrender to the situation. I'm saying surrender in the situation to recognize. And that becomes easier when you drop underneath and you recognize that you are a soul. You incarnate into this human experience. Life is your school. Every situation, every experience, every relationship is part of the curriculum and the classroom for your soul's evolution. And really then, if you start seeing yourself as a soul, then part of the surrender becomes while you're going through the experience to then shift your focus that while you're going through that sickness or illness or difficulty or heartbreak, what classroom am I in? And what is it that my soul is seeking to learn? Otherwise, it's so easy to stay stuck in the what is happening and be pissed off. What is my soul seeking to learn in this experience? What is my soul seeking to learn from this illness, from this disease, from this physical challenge? If this physical challenge is a classroom, we take physics, we take biology, we take mathematics. If this physical challenge is a classroom, there must be a reason and something my soul is seeking to learn. When we can really focus on that level and learn the lesson, and grow and evolve, a couple of things will happen. It might affect your physicality and your body starts to shift because energy shifts. And also, that matches the right moment, the right time, the right people then start showing up to meet your own awakening and understanding of why you're going through it. And I think when we learn the lessons, where we are, when we are with who we're with as a soul, that's what begins to unlock to that next level. And I think we have this paradigm of success in our culture that I think is very limited, that success means you attain the goal, you achieve the thing, you climb the mountain, you got that material thing. But I really think that true success is exactly what you're demonstrating. True success in any given moment, whether you did the push-up challenge or didn't do the push, whether you attain the money or whether you didn't. The real success is, did you learn the lesson for why you attracted that situation? And did you grow through that? And did you become more of who you are, more of your true self? Did you realize more of your authentic nature and live that? And I think that's the key. And I think that really do that. It helps us surrender in a situation so that we can grow through the situation and then hopefully transcend the situation into a different situation, into a different classroom. And so I think that's an important piece.
I love your point about instead of why is this happening to me, what is the classroom that I'm in? If my soul is here as a student to learn, through life's experiences. I'll say one final thing on me, and then maybe we'll bring it back to where we started around, with your mother, is the lesson that I've been learning in this experience is how much of my life's actions have been dictated by just this chronic underlying current of anxiety. All of my movements, all of these goals I've set, all of the actions I've taken is because there was some anxiety under there. And now with this lack of energy, with this pause, that anxiety is clearing because I don't have the energy. When my mind produces one of those fear-inducing thoughts of you got to go do this, you got to go do that, my body has no energy for it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not doing any of that stuff. And I realized none of that stuff was actually important. So it's this extraordinary gift that I will live the next 40, 50, 60 years of my life without that anxiety anymore.
Your soul is calling you to transcend that motivation.
Exactly.
That's the power. Your soul is calling you to transcend that motivation and align with a deeper inspiration.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings us back to, the story about your mother where, I know we got a lot of your perspective around the experience with your mom, but one of the things that you'd shared in the book was just how beautifully graceful she was in her acceptance of her diagnosis. And, the first time taking her to the doctor for her chemotherapy, it was just, like I'm down and ready. I'm confident for whatever I'm meant to go through. And the gift as an outsider looking in and just listening to your story was her showing up in that way allowed you to reconnect with her in such a magnificent way. And like you said, I didn't realize that my mother was an enlightened being. Like I just thought she was mom.
Yeah.
And her showing up in that way woke you up in a really profound way that gave you clarity around the book. It even extends beyond just how we as an individual interpret the world. It's, as Yogananda says, like the man who has transformed himself can impact thousands without uttering a single word. It's what your mom did to you, and I'm sure to the countless people whose lives she touched. So,
and if we didn't have that experience, there would be no magic of surrender. I get messages all the time from people. Like I got a message from someone the other day that she said she was suicidal, read The Magic of Surrender, and it's been keeping her alive, and now she's ready to live. And so it's like, wow, if that experience didn't happen with my mom, I didn't go through that, then all of the other experiences that I have not even heard of. And so sometimes when life doesn't go the way we think it should go, we judge it and we get disappointed and we, collapse and we feel alone. But if we really, I just want to invite people to really look at life and look at all of the things that didn't go according to plan, that didn't work out how you wanted, but worked out better.
Yeah, right.
More amazing. But you couldn't see in the moment, because many times when we don't get what we think we want, the ego interprets that as something's wrong, it's not happening, I did something bad, God doesn't love me, and we give up and we collapse. Because from the level of the mind and the ego, we're not able to see the total, infinite, multidimensional possibilities of how life is unfolding and how life is happening. And if we look back, for instance, even in a relationship, anyone listening, if you look back on a relationship that you were so sure was the one, you were so sure you wanted it to work, you couldn't even imagine living your life without that person. And then it broke up and it didn't happen and you were devastated. You didn't think you could find love again. Now maybe it's 2022, 5-10 years have passed. You look back and now you look back at that situation and who you were and you go, thank God.
I know.
Thank God that didn't happen. And so don't be so sure to think you know why something is happening. Don't be so sure to think you know why something's not happening. And I think even when it seems like something bad is happening, sometimes you won't understand it in the moment, but only after the fact it's happened. And this is why I say one of the keys to surrender is to be curious. Curiosity is an I don't know. Curiosity is when you're not just attaching meanings to everything, and in that meaning, you limit it. Curiosity is the availability to say, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why my mom's going. I don't know why I don't know why I'm here, but I'm available to finding out and allowing life in its intelligence, life that has been around for billions of years, the same intelligence as breathing you and breathing me and digesting your food, digesting our food, functioning 8 billion people and all of existence, the same intelligence, to allow it to lead us. And I really believe that if we relax and trust and allow life to lead us, we're now working in harmony with the flow of nature, and life will support us in ways that maybe not where you imagine, but I think that's the magic, often beyond what you can imagine. That's what's exciting.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've never been more excited to live life now, surrendered to just the perfection and the beauty of whatever's coming my way and the pain and the struggle. It's all part of living and developing the soul. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've really enjoyed your book as well. And I know I listened to it on audio.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's always cool to kind of hear your voice. And I know that your paperback version is coming out very shortly. And actually, by the time this is released, I think it will have just come out. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, just in a nutshell, the paperback is coming out May the 3rd. So just depending on when you're listening to this, go get the paperback, all of the stories. You've invited me to share a lot of stories in the podcast, which I love sharing stories, so thank you. But there's many more stories and teachings in the paperback, The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go. Go to Amazon, get the paperback. Depending also when you listen to this, May the 7th, we're doing a live online virtual event, and we'll do something special. It may have passed, But May the 7th is a 2 to 3 hour online event called Reinvent Live. I'm going to be sharing how to reinvent yourself and let go of who you were and connect with your truth and share your gift with the world. And so what we're doing is when you get the paperback on Amazon, go to www.kuteblackson.com/reinvent seminar. Enter your name, your email, and your receipt from the paperback. And what you get is a bunch of free gifts, and you get access to the Reinvent Live. For those that, because of the timing, those that may have missed it live, send us an email as well, and we will send you a recording of the Reinvent Live seminar.
What I'm going to do is in the top of the show notes, I'm going to put a link to the book so you can purchase it. I'm going to put a link to the KuteBlackson.com Reinvent seminar. So it'll be very easy for you to just click on that for anyone who's interested. And Kute, thank you for the time here, for writing the book. Surrender is such an critically important concept for people to embrace in their lives. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you bring to the world next, man.
Thank you.
Hey, did you get something of value out of this podcast? If so, I'm going to ask you a favor. Would you be so amazing as to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review? Your ratings and reviews can show someone who's just discovered our podcast for the first time that we are worth listening to. And that way we can reach a wider audience. So please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. You rock.